Are you battling anxiety right now? And are you wondering how understanding God's sovereignty can help you with that? Well, in this video, I want to go over 3 biblical truths that can help you overcome anxiety. And they are number 1, that God is in control. Number 2, that God has a plan and a purpose for everything. And number 3, God's character is unchanging. So I want to go over these concepts with you, and I also want to use some Bible verses and stories that I'm going to read to you. But I want to take it one step further, and as we go, I'm going to be sharing some action steps that you can take to really incorporate these ideas into your life. So before we dive in, and if you're new here, hi, I'm Valerie. I'm a biblical counselor, and welcome to my channel. I call it Into the Forest Therapy Farm because I love horses and nature. So before we dive in, I want to go over what we mean exactly when we talk about that God is sovereign. So if you look up the word sovereign in the dictionary, you'll see that it says having supreme rank, power, and authority, and being above all others in character, importance, excellence, etc. So when we say that God is sovereign, we mean that God has supreme rank, power, and authority, and God is above all others in character, importance, excellence, etc. So I've been reading through this book, Anxious for Nothing, and in this book, the author Max Lucado writes, to change the way a person responds to life, change what a person believes about life. The most important thing about you is your belief system. So that's what I want to go over today in this video. And that's because in my ministry as a biblical counselor, I see over and over again how anxiety decreases as someone's understanding of God and who He is increases. So anxiety is something that comes from our minds and our thoughts. So what we want to do to correct this is to battle these thoughts with good thoughts about who God is, the fact that He's in control. So let's go ahead and get started talking about the first concept. And to introduce you to this, I first want to read from Isaiah chapter 55, verses 10 through 12. So if you want to read along in your own Bible so that you can highlight things or underline things, I would really like for you to do that. But if not, that's fine. And I'm going to read it to you from my Bible, which is the New King James Version. So it says, for as the rain comes down and the snow from heaven, and do not return from there, but water the earth, and make it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goes forth from my mouth. It shall not return to me void, but it shall accomplish what I please, and it shall prosper in the thing for which I sent it. For you shall go out with joy, and be led out with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth into singing before you, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. So God is in control of every raindrop and every snowflake, and He already has a plan and a purpose before He sends them down to the earth. I want to do a little exercise with you, and if you're in a safe place, I want you to close your eyes and just visualize this with me. So imagine that we're trail riding. You're on a horse, you're going down a trail in the woods. It's beautiful, it's fun. You've ridden this horse a couple times before, but you've never been on this particular trail. Now you start to notice that some dark clouds are kind of coming in. And before you know it, the lightning claps and a huge branch falls down right beside you. Now your horse startles and takes off running. So what do? You lean forward in the saddle, you tighten your grip on the reins. In fact, every muscle in your body is tightening as you try desperately to stay in the saddle and keep that horse on a trail. Now keep your eyes closed for just a minute longer and I want you to now imagine releasing that tight grip on those reins. What would that look like for you to hand over the reins to God during this perceived moment of chaos? What would happen if you surrendered your fear, your safety, and your future over to God? Now you can open your eyes if you want. And I just really want to encourage you to hand those reins over to God, because God is in control. God knows you. He knows that horse that you've been riding. He knows every trail in that forest and where it leads. And He knows when the storms are going to come and when you're going to start to feel things crashing down around you. So, you might be sitting there and thinking, okay, that sounds great. Hand the reins over to God. Let's do it. But how do we do that? So here are the 3 action steps that I'm going to give you for this truth to help really just incorporate this idea into your own life. So number 1, and this is always what I start with any of the people who I serve through biblical counseling, is to get into a routine of reading the Bible every day. Because when you read the Bible every day, that is you doing your part. Now, I said earlier that God is in control, but you still have a part to play. And your part is to seek God and to have a relationship with Him. So, number 2 is to pray. That's the second component. Because when you read the Bible, that's your way of listening to God. That's how God speaks to you. He gave us this amazing book full of wisdom and stories that we can learn from every day, that we can apply to our lives. The truths in this book never change. And when you pray, that's you speaking to God. So that's the conversation, and that's what it's all about, is having a relationship with God. He didn't create you to be a robot. He gave you free will, and He wants you to make the choice to seek Him and have a relationship with Him. He is always going to be there for you, waiting, and He wants you to be able to make that choice to have that relationship with Him. So, number 3, what I want you to do is to release your control. Now, I want to do another little visualization exercise. So if you like doing these kinds of things, you can close your eyes, and if you clicked play on this video today, it's probably because you are worrying, you're anxious, you are battling anxiety. So I want you to think about one thing that you are struggling with right now. And I want you to hold your hands out, cup your hands, and imagine holding that one thing in your hands. So this could look like not knowing how you're going to pay the bills at the end of the month, or it could be worrying about the health of a loved one. Now I want you to imagine God's hands coming under your hands. Feel the warmth of His hands, feel the strength, and I want you to just let go, release whatever that is, and leave it in God's hands. He wants you to do that. He wants you to trust Him. And you can pray to Him and ask Him to please help you to do that. God, please help me to trust You with these things that are causing anxiety in my life. Okay, so let's jump into now the second truth that I'm going to be talking about in this video, which is that God has a plan and a purpose for everything. Now, we did talk about this in Isaiah chapter 55, those verses that I read to you. They talked about how God has a plan and a purpose for every raindrop and every snowflake. And He also says that His word will not return to Him void. It will accomplish the purpose for which He sent it. And you see, He sent you here for a purpose, and you have to accomplish the purpose for which He sent you. But I want you to realize that we might not always know what the purpose is behind some of the things that we go through in this life. So when we go through a trial, we might not ever understand in this life why we had to endure that trial. And also, some of the trials that we go through might never be about us in the first place. And let me break this down for you a little bit by quoting Romans 8:28. It says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who are called according to his purpose. I love this verse, and I think a lot of people do, but I see some people tweaking this verse a little bit and changing it to, God is working everything together for my good. And maybe in some circumstances, this can be true. Maybe God is working everything together for your good, but that's not what the verse says. It says he's working everything together for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. And to take this one step further, I'm going to read you the story of Job. Well, not the entire story because it's 42 chapters long, but I would encourage you to read the story on your own. I'm just going to read you a couple verses right now from Job chapter 1, verses 6 through 12. It says, "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, 'From where do you come?' So Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it.' Then the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil?' So Satan answered the Lord and said, 'Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face.' And the Lord said to Satan, 'Behold, all that he has is in your power, only do not lay a hand on his person.' So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord." Now, Satan then proceeded to destroy almost everything that Job had on this earth. In one day, he went out and killed all of Job's livestock, even killed all of Job's children in a terrible, tragic storm. And when Job heard what had happened, what was his first reaction? The first thing he did was praise God, because he said, "God has given all these things to me, and God can also take them away." So instead of focusing on the negative, Job focused on the positive. He thanked God for what he already had. And that's very important. But then Satan ended up going back and having another meeting in heaven where God gave him permission and authority to attack Job's person. So he ended up being covered in painful boils from the crown of his head to the soles of his feet. And at this point, Job begins to call out to God and really just ask a lot of why questions, which I think is what a lot of us do when we're going through trials and pain and suffering in our lives. We call out to God and we ask, why did this happen? Job asked, why was I even born? But when God confronts Job, he comes out of a whirlwind in chapter 38. And instead of answering any of Job's questions, he asked Job some questions. Questions like, who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth and issued from the womb? He asked questions like, who gave the horse strength? Have you clothed his neck with thunder? So these were all questions to get Job reflecting on the fact that God is all powerful and God is in control. And God has a plan and a purpose for everything. We can ask why. There's nothing wrong with asking God why, but the more important question is to ask God who. Because when God answered Job, he didn't answer Job's questions about why. He told him who he was. So here are the 3 action steps that I have for you for this, to really get this truth solidified into your mind. And the first is, I want you to go back and think again about something that's causing anxiety in your life right now. And if you've been asking God, why me? Why did this have to happen? I want you to shift and start asking God, who are you? Because God might not answer your question of why, but he will always help you understand who he is. And you can do that by reading his word. Number two is think back on some of the struggles that you've already been through in the past. And this could maybe be a journaling exercise for you if you like to journal, or it could be a drawing if you're an artist, maybe paint something that would descript this. But you're going to be asking, how has God used some of the trials in my life to either help me learn something or to help me minister and help someone else? So think about the things, just spend some time really going back and thinking about things in your past and what good came out of them. And number three is that I really just want you to keep in mind that God might not reveal why things happened. So just ask God to help you to release that need to understand and to know why things happen, and give you more of a desire instead to know God and understand who God is. So let's go ahead and get into the last concept, the last biblical truth that I want to talk to you about today, which is that God's character is unchanging. Now, Hebrews 13:8 tells us Jesus Christ is the same today, yesterday, and forever. And this means that when we think about God's sovereignty, when we think about his character, it is always good. He is always faithful. He always loves us. And he does that no matter what the circumstances are. Whereas we tend to be heavily influenced by our circumstances. So when something happens to us in our lives, it changes our character. So this is because our emotions fluctuate, and it might look like saying something that we should have never said, or doing something that we knew we shouldn't have done. But God, on the other hand, he stays the same. And this is really good news, because it means that no matter what happens, no matter what kind of bad choices we made in the past, no matter what bad decisions we made, God still loves us just the same as if we had lived a perfect life. Now, this is if we choose to accept Jesus as our Savior, because Jesus died. Jesus already lived the perfect life and sacrificed himself so that we could have this gift. And all we have to do to accept the gift is to believe in Jesus. So we make a lot of plans in our lives, but it is ultimately God's purpose that will prevail. And his purpose we know is good, because we know that God's character is good and constant. Now, I do want to just share a little story and point out that we can't let our pain be in vain. So God isn't going to let any of that pain be in vain. He doesn't promise us that we'll just float through this life pain-free. He does promise us that in heaven there will be no pain, there will be no tears. But in this life, we're going to have to accept the fact that struggles will occur, and we might not always understand why, and we might not always get the answers. But in my life, I know that this is true, because I wouldn't be here today serving and getting to do this ministry as a biblical counselor if I hadn't endured trials in my own life. But I found a way to seek God's goodness and understand a little bit about how God wants me to use the pain in my own life to learn and to be able to turn around and help other people who are struggling with pain, who are going through trials, who don't understand what's going on. So here are my 3 tips that I want to talk about, my 3 action steps for you today for the idea that God's character is unchanging. This is how you can kind of anchor yourself in that biblical truth that God's character is good and unchanging. So number 1, I did mention earlier that I would love for you to read the entire book of Job. Especially, I would love for you to start by reading, if you're struggling with these why questions, read Job chapters 38 through 41. these are the chapters where God answers all of Job's why questions, and I believe that these are answers for us as well, for everyone who's asking God why. This is where God tells us the answer to those questions by revealing who He is. Number 2, this might be a journaling thing for you, or it could be something you do in prayer, but as you are on your journey, on your own healing journey, battling anxiety and trying to overcome this, as you're learning more and more about God each day, I want you to write down one thing about God's good and unchanging character, one thing every day that you are learning. And number 3, say a prayer and ask God to give you a bigger perspective. Ask Him to reveal to you His majesty, how powerful He is, so that you can really start to rest in the peace of His goodness, in the peace of trusting God, trusting that He's in control, trusting that He has a purpose and a plan for you, and trusting that His character is good. So if you're still here, I want to thank you so much, and I'm really proud of you for seeking healing, seeking understanding, seeking to do something in your battle against anxiety, and doing it in a biblical Christian way. I have a lot of other resources about this topic. I have a written blog post that goes along with this video, so if you want to dive in a little deeper into this topic, please head over to my website. I'll put the link in the description. And I also have a lot of other resources over there for you on anxiety and biblical counseling, because anxiety can be caused by so many things. So please head over there and check those out. I'm working on putting out more video content for those of you who like the videos. I just want to thank you today for being here, and I would love to connect with you. So if you could just put a comment, let me know what you learned, what you would like to know more about. And if there are any of those action steps that you would consider trying, I would really like to challenge you to pick one of those that you could try today, and let me know what that is. And if you are still struggling and you want to talk to someone, I really would like to encourage you to reach out to someone at your church, someone locally that you can get together with and talk to, or reach out to me. I meet with people online, so I would love to connect with you in that way too. Thank you for being here today, and I hope to see you again in another video.